Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be going what if Krillin was reincarnated part 5. Make sure to like and subscribe, it helps, and it means the world to me. A slow join the Discord if you want. Disclaimer. There may be 18 plus stuff. With that stuff out of the way, let's begin chapter 33. A new challenger approaches. 3 years had passed since the last events. Marin was almost 6 years old, and Ryu was 4 years old and a half. I started to teach them martial arts, and they immediately took a liking to it. Marin was growing at fast speeds. Their power level was already above 100,000, and Ryu, even though he didn't train as hard, had a power level of 50,000. When they trained outside, me, Jaika and Lazuli had our fun in the house. My power level already increased up to 650 million. No threat in the universe was yet active which I could train and pit myself against now. Goku's power level reached 150 million, and he learned how to become a Super Saiyan 2 as well. Combined with his Ikari mode, things were going very well for him. In the power category, Vegeta was on his way to Master Super Saiyan 2. Raditz did his things while Nappa called me and asked, "Yo, if it isn't my favorite bald guy Krillin, I have a job that would require someone of your talents." Someone of my talents? In the film industry. It was something new, so I could give it a try. I always wondered how it would feel to be a movie star. I asked him of the details and he responded, "We need a bald guy to play the main character in this movie about racing and family. We decided to call it Furious and Fast. Won't it be cool?" Haha. I responded with an even tone of voice. "Sure, count me in. It would be a new experience to star in a movie." So for a few months I became an actor who did his stunts. It was pretty fun. The lines were a bit cheesy, and the racing scenes pretty good if you like this type of stuff. I wasn't a big fan of it though. After all the scenes have been filmed, they wanted to pay me, but I declined. I was the second richest man on earth, just a little behind the Briefs family. Their money was no help to me. I told them they could donate it to help others who were in more need of them. I left the studio with Nappa as we ate at a nearby food stand. He nodded his head at me. He was now sporting a white suit and black sunglasses. He looked professional. After we finished our food, we both bid goodbye to each other. The movie would be sold in the theaters and cinemas in a few more months, after all the effects and editing would be done. I decided to go home and play with my children before going back to train, when suddenly I could feel immense Kai coming out of the ocean. I quickly teleported towards the Kai, and I could see a giant yellow sponge with 2 gap teeth coming out of the ocean. He was shouting, I am ready, Mr. Krabs, I will make all of these humans into Krabby Patties." On his shoulder was a red crustacean humanoid with big elongated eyes who was laughing. "Ikagaga, SpongeBob meat boyo. With all of this fresh meat we could sell Krabby Patties at a 300 increased price. Let's not even forget the extra vitamins from these strong humans." The blue squid humanoid scoffed and leaped off the other shoulder of the sponge creature, and said in an annoyed tone of voice, "I'm not paid enough for this." I couldn't let the evil sponge-like creature and his crazed crustacean boss transform the humans of Earth into patties. I charged a giant shuriken Kienzan and infused it with the wind attribute with my magic, and threw it at him. The sponge immediately got cut into pieces, but he regenerated himself in an instant. What a tenacious life form. I needed to destroy him completely to make him disappear just like the original Cell and Majin Buu. I grimaced. As the sponge was taking his steps, the ground was shaking. He was immensely strong. I immediately turned my dots on and used all of my available techniques to boost myself above the giant sponge's power. The crustacean immediately shouted, "We will start our first fresh Krabby Patty with this baldy over there." Out of nowhere the sponge took out a giant spatula and waved it towards me. I dodged it by going off its grids and hit him directly in the eyes, making him lose balance and fall back in the ocean. I grabbed the humanoid crustacean and fried him thoroughly, transforming him into a 5-star meal. Then I threw him back in the ocean, letting him get eaten by his people. Tons of humanoid fish started to gnaw away at the carcass of a crustacean, as a loud voice shouted in a pain tone, "Mr. Krabs knew." The giant sponge's height immediately reduced by a lot, but his power level increased by so much I had to use my cake and immediately to the max level to keep up with him. Shockwaves started to appear as we fought on back and forth. He was a tenacious fighter with an iron will. I could feel his grief at his boss death. So I decided to give him a fast death, but out of nowhere a pink starfish humanoid appeared and tried to tackle me away. I dodged, and he knocked into the sponge instead. The sponge immediately said in an annoyed tone of voice, "Patrick, he killed Mr. Krabs, what are you doing?" The star Patrick said in a dumb type of voice, "Oh, I'm sorry SpongeBob, he is too fast. I wanted to tackle him and eat him." The sponge and the star were equal in power, but the star was stronger physically, while also being slower and dumber. They both started to whisper to each other, which I could hear when I used my magic to eavesdrop on their conversation. "Patrick, I will capture him and you spear your sharp head directly off his body." Patrick just saluted wrongly, and nodded his head, while his tongue was out of his mouth. SpongeBob's aura immediately started to change as a red hue appeared around it. He was sacrificing strength for speed. He immediately appeared behind me and took me into a Nelson lock. Unfortunately for him, I already knew he would do this. I disappeared from the lock just in time as Patrick spearheaded SpongeBob. They were both stuck into each other now. It was time to end this. I charged my Kai into my hands as a giant electrified Kamehameha was shot towards them, evaporating both of them till not even dust was left behind. I looked into the ocean and I could see the squid humanoid observing from below. He looked happy at the things that happened and bowed towards me while saying, "Our race will never fight again with you land dwellers. You have helped us take care of this cancers that existed in our society." After that he disappeared underwater, maybe going to his house to drink some tea and play his clarinet. I could hear some of his thoughts seeping trough, so I realized what he wanted to do. Well, the squid's power wasn't any lower than the others, his mental barriers were very lax. I could hear his thoughts even if I didn't pry into his mind. After this event, I just got home and helped my children to train a bit before having some more fun with my wives. Life was good for me. It felt so good to just be lazing around and having fun, teaching my children, and just not be bothered by other things. Training every day was boring. Enjoying the other things about life was a good change of pace, which I would always welcome. But I didn't continuously indulge in these activities. I still wasn't strong enough to even touch Beerus's little toe yet. I needed to train myself until I could protect everything that I cared about on this planet. I could truly feel that I was a part of this universe now. As I started to ponder these wonders, my sacred Kai purifying speed increased during the meditation session that I just started inside my gravity chamber. It seemed that accepting myself of being this universe now would help me understand the mantra better. I still thought if this was just a dream from time to time. My sacred Kai increased towards 20%, and my benevolent Buddha stand could now increase my power level up to 50 times. I nodded my head. This meditation session wasn't long, but it gave me great results. My power level also increased to 700 million. 6 months passed by. It's been 5 years and a half since Bajak and his cronies got destroyed. A telepathic message came from King Kai as he said awkwardly, "Hey Krillin, I need your help with something. Some other demon popped up in hell now, and it needs your expertise." I wasn't sure why was he so panicked. I defeated the other demon easily. How could this other one be any stronger? King Kai continued, "The thing is, this demon took control of an innocent soul, and used it as the vessel for its revival. You can't kill him. You need to expunge him out of the vessel. My spirit bomb would do its job nicely here." Inwardly King Kai was relieved as I didn't realize Bajak's attack was due to his negligence of the seal on his planet. I decided to help King Kai again. There wasn't anything interesting happening on Earth anyway. Everything was stale. The other sea fighters' training speed slowed as well. Without any threats to increase their motivation and training speed, they stopped growing as fast as before. But they were still pretty strong. Human Z fighters broke off the 50 million mark, while Goku reached 250 million in his base. Vegeta reached 190 million, while Nappa and Raditz took training slower, and barely reached 120 million. I made my way into hell, and there I saw the new demon in all its splendor. It was just like the last demon, red and with horns. Their appearance was eerily similar, but also different at the same time. It seemed like they were of the same species. He was brandishing his scythe with his right hand, as he was harvesting the life of wardens like wheat. I threw myself at him, stopping him from killing any more wardens. I created my scythe of Kai and started to fight him. Scythe against scythe we clashed, and he started to overpower me. He smirked as he drew the scythe back, and a small cut appeared on my face. He licked the blood left on the scythe as the cut immediately healed, but he laughed and he disappeared. Above my head appeared his scythe, one glowing red eye at the top of it near the blade. I could feel him trying to destroy my insides. What kind of technique was this? I suddenly powered up with my benevolent Buddha stand. Sacred Kai enshrouded me as the demon started to wail inside me. He immediately left, appearing outside. All the damage he did to me healed in a jiffy. His skin was burned due to the sacred Buddha Kai countering him directly. He looked at me with eyes of animosity. I said in a rough voice, "How dare you challenge Ross?" Ross? Another strange demonic name. Whatever I needed to save the host. While the demons started to monologue, I gathered Kai inside my palm to make a mini spirit bomb that revolved extremely fast, looking like a mini tornado. I used instant transmission to appear behind him and take him by surprise, while I rammed the sphere inside him. His essence started to leave the body as it entered the side. A shirtless human man appeared. He had his hair in a big braid and blue eyes. I healed him and he got up while saying, "What a goddamn nightmare." He held his head as the pain didn't subside from his consciousness. He looked around me, then down at the side. He gasped, realizing that it wasn't a nightmare. He bowed towards me and said, "Thanks for taking care of Ross, sir." He was a pretty polite guy considering he got corrupted by the scythe in the first place. I grabbed the scythe and he grimaced. It seemed he didn't want to touch that thing or see it again. Immediately the demon from inside tried to invade my consciousness, but it was stopped extremely easily. Ross Day. The weapon was pretty strong if you considered it in mortal ranking, but it was garbage in someone of Super Saiyan 2 or above standard. I destroyed Ross' true body, immediately transforming him into nothing. The man sighed and said, "My name is Kane. I don't know who you are, but could you do me a favor? Could you take me to planet Ionia in the East Galaxy?" I nodded my head. This guy was all alone and possessed by a demon. The least I could do is send him back to his home. I asked King Kai about the coordinates of the planet, and after a few minutes, he telepathically transmitted them to me. I grabbed Kane by the shoulder and teleported directly to the planet, back on his home planet. Seeing the familiar surroundings, he bowed to me again and took his leave. He met with a masked man in assassin suit which berated him coldly, then looked towards me and cupped his fists. They both left in a shadow flicker. I decided to go back to Earth since this job was done as well. According to Jice and Birder, most of the planets were fixed, and a lot of the planet organization trade personnel now were either construction workers or joined the Galactic Patrol. They now were all working honest jobs. Before Bu came, everything would be okay for the planet, or so I thought. On a distant pyramid planet with a giant tree, a purple feline yawned as he asked Whis. Whis, I dreamed about a bald guy who called himself Buddha, and he hit me in the head. I want to find this guy. Whis chuckled, putting a hand near his mouth, and said, Lord Beerus, it's just a dream. What do you know about this Buddha person anyway? Beerus scratched his head and said, well, nothing, all I know he is bald and strong. Whis immediately held his nose and said, before we continue this conversation, you better go and take a bath, Lord Beerus. Beerus chuckled awkwardly and scratched the back of his head. A few tens of minutes later, he came back in his God of Destruction outfit and shouted, Oracle fish, get your ass out here. The tiny fish in a little glass started to fly quickly towards Beerus and said, oh my lord, it isn't time to wake up yet, what's the hurry? Beerus snorted and said, I want the latest news of bald strong men of the galaxy. The tiny fish gulped and sweat-dropped and said, the strongest and baldest man in the universe is this guy here. He created an image which showed my face on it. Beerus gasped as he said, this guy, I know he resembles somewhat the guy from my dream. What did this guy do? The fish continued, he eradicated the cult empire from the universe and became its new emperor. Beerus nodded his head. Frieza was a pretty strong guy. His father was also extremely strong, both dying to this guy's hand is some news. Where is he currently residing? The fish just said two words. Planet Earth. At those two words, I could feel a shiver go down my spine. Back on Earth, something big was making its way to this tiny planet. And that big thing was Cat-shaped. Chapter 34. Beerus the Destroyer. The cat humanoid with purple skin was yawning as a bubble of Kai moved at fast speeds in the void. Whis was keeping a straight face as he used his powers to travel in the void towards Earth. Beerus immediately asked again, Whis, are we there yet? No, Lord Beerus, I already told you it would take me at least half an hour before we can get to Earth. But Whis, I'm worried. Please bear with it, Lord Beerus, you can exercise after we get to Earth. But I don't want to exercise much, Whis. I'm going to Earth to check about this bald guy. Maybe if he is not up to my standards, I'll just destroy the planet and go back to sleep. I'm still tired. Beerus yawned again and scratched the back of his neck. He was quite sleepy right now. Whis just chuckled and continued his journey towards Earth. I stood meditating in my personal gravity chamber. My power breached trough 1 billion in my base form. I could already use the combination of all my techniques with some strain, but I couldn't reach the stage of it being comparable to the Super Saiyan Blue transformation again. There was a lack of something that made them fuse perfectly. I couldn't put it in words exactly. I got out of the chamber, and Marin and Ryu ran forward towards my embrace. I picked both of them up as they said in a childish voice, Daddy started to train in there longer and longer. You should play with us more. I smiled towards them and said, then let's play right now. You know, when I'm not around, you can ask your mothers to take you to play with Goten and Trunks, you know. They both shook their little heads and said, we want to play with Daddy. I chuckled and decided to entertain the two little boogers for some time. Suddenly my danger senses went into the extremes. I could feel something so strong approaching the planet, but I couldn't sense what it was. I could feel that it was strong, but I couldn't grasp how much nor its location exactly. Out of nowhere, a multicolored beam of light appeared on the planet as a loud voice was heard on all of the planet. Krillin, come here if you don't want Earth to become space dust. All of the Z fighters flew and teleported immediately towards the location. I grimaced and teleported there as well. I cursed inside. Why did he wake up already? Beerus, the Lord of Destruction, and Whis, his attendant and teacher, were waiting for me near the ocean surface. Beerus eyed me and said with a lazy tone of voice, I could see how you could beat Frieza, but you were really out of colds in his other Sun League. The other Z fighters appeared continuously. Goku was second, teleporting to my Kai signature. His power level reached 260 million. Vegeta came next, then the other two Saiyans. Lastly, the human Z fighters arrived as well. Beerus eyed all of us while Whis didn't decide to comment. He was just a spectator here. Beerus stopped observing us and pointed towards me and said, you fight me, power up to your best. I could only comply with the Lord of Destruction instructions, if I didn't want everyone to get obliterated and become unrevivable as well. I concentrated as all of my 6 dots started to shine. My power level increased by 64 times. I buffed up, and electric red auras started to encast me. As I used my Kaiken at its maximum already, Beerus started to watch with more interest as my power level increased, but then he scoffed. I see your power level is extremely high. In the mortal level you could be considered unrivaled, but you are still a long way from even touching the god level. I gritted my teeth and activated the benevolent Buddha stand, as my power level increased by more than 35 times. With the increase of my power, so did my sacred Kai purity. Beerus' eyes immediately started to shine when he saw the figure of the Buddha behind me, and launched himself directly at me with no other warnings. I tried to fight him head-on, but his power was immense. He immediately punched me, and the power of the punch knocked me away directly into space. Beerus followed directly. My broken bones started to mend themselves as I started to encast my body with Kai. The Kai scythe immediately appeared in my hands. As I started to hack at Beerus, he dodged easily, and even grabbed the Kai scythe, and broke it with his fingers. His strength was way too high. If I didn't enter the state when I firstly used all of the techniques together, I couldn't make him exert even 15% of his power. Beerus yawned and said, "If this is all you got, I might as well just destroy the planet already." Inside his mind, Whis' voice however interfered. "Lord Beerus, don't forget what your job is actually. This planet mortal level is extremely high, and it's still increasing. You can't destroy it on a whim. As your teacher and advisor, I advise you to not destroy it, as it would lower this universe's mortal level. Also, we didn't even try to eat any of the foods yet." Beerus transmitted his thoughts back to Whis. "I'm just bluffing with him. I want to put him in a precarious position, so he can unlock some more of his hidden potential. You can feel it too, right, Whis? His power resembles of that fat bastards who disappeared some millions of years ago." Whis chuckled inwardly as he observed the battle in the outer space from the Earth. Beerus was already charging his destruction ball, which he threw directly at me. I knew that if I didn't stop it, it would truly destroy everything that I held dear about. I started to shout as I forcibly tried to increase the output of Sacred Kai, and increase my power level. Red blood veins appeared in my eyes, as other green veins started to appear all over my body. Suddenly all the other auras disappeared and all of the dots combined on my forehead to resemble something of a lotus flower. All the veins calmed down as my mind became tranquil. I took the blast head-on, but I could barely stop it. I counterattacked with my own Kai, and made it implode. The explosion took both us in its radius. After explosion calmed down, I was back to normal, exhausted and falling down to earth, while Beerus was all okay and dandy. He had a glint in his eyes as he looked at me and grinned. He grabbed me by the wrist, not letting me fall down, and grinned. "You're an interesting guy. You have the legacy of that old Buddha guy, don't you?" I just smirked at him and decided to not comment. His yellow eyes narrowed, but the grin didn't disappear from his face, and he continued. "Well, whatever, I won't destroy your planet. Its mortal level is too high, and it would clash with my job if I destroyed it selfishly. I also didn't get to eat anything from Earth yet." We both teleported back to Whis. Whis smiled back at Beerus and said, "Well, Lord Beerus, since you are free now, let's try some of the local cuisines." I decided to call Bulma for this. She should know how to fill these gluttons up. Vegeta was terrified by Beerus' presence, but he knew what to do, just like in the anime. When he heard that Beerus wanted food, he immediately wanted to cook it himself. Beerus narrowed his eyes at Vegeta, seemingly trying to remember something about the past, but he was too lazy to continue thinking about it, and just yawned and followed me towards Bulma's place. I informed Bulma beforehand of everything, so she created a giant feast with different Japanese dishes. There was even pizza and pudding. Whis and Beerus' eyes started to shine as they started to eat. Beerus ate just like a Saiyan as he shouted, "So delicious." Whis ate like a gentleman, but from time to time stars would appear in his eyes as he would say in a peppy tone of voice, "This is so good, we should come to eat here from time to time, Lord Beerus." Beerus ignored the comment as he was physically engulfing food like a black hole. He was even out eating Saiyans at this pace. After the whole table was emptied of food, Beerus punched the table as he said, "More?" Bulma complied. She fed 2 Saiyans every day. She had tons of food and tons of cooks as well, but even the cooks started to groan, strained to the pace Beerus and Whis ate. After all of the cooks were knocked out due to exhaustion, fortunately Beerus and Whis were satisfied. Beerus almost looked like his brother of how stuffed he became. His eyes were droopy as it seemed he was going in hibernation. The next minute he muttered to Whis, "Whis, let's go home, I'm sleepy." Whis complied and told Bulma, "Miss, I might come here from time to try out new dishes." Bulma complied after she heard of how strong they were, and when she looked at my torn clothes, she knew these guys weren't to be messed with. She would comply with Whis' wishes. After they both left in a torrent of multicolored Kai, a sigh left out of my mouth. Everyone was tense, Goku included. Piccolo was still trembling due to the oppressive might he felt when I and Beerus fought. I clenched my hands. It was good Beerus was a glutton who didn't care much about his job, but if I was to anger him, things could have done south. I needed to master the combination of all of the techniques. If I wasn't wrong, I could fight Beerus while he wasn't fully serious with it, and might even come on top. I wasn't sure of the limits of Beerus' strength. It was said he started to learn Ultra Instinct, but he didn't master it. The end of the Super Anime left many questions to be answered. After everyone got back to train, they realized they were still weak compared to the top fishes of the universe. I had some fun with Jaika and Lazuli, played with my children, and decided it was time to enter closed-door training for a much longer time. I need to always be able to enter in the Supreme Mode, as I dubbed it, by will and not accidentally. I needed to learn how to fully combine all of the techniques myself and thoroughly master the mantra so I could get my sacred Kai to 50% purity. After that I needed to find the latter half of the mantra to reach 100% sacred Kai purity. I still had lots of things to do. Growing lax was a huge problem. After this closed-door training I would venture in the universe and search for the next part of the mantra. I would of course warn the others of Majin Buu before he came so they would be prepared. At the rate they grew stronger, by the time Majin Buu came Goku would be able to defeat him without getting anyone absorbed. Hopefully things would work out as everyone was way stronger than normal. I made sure to make more preparations besides leaving everything on the Z Fighters' shoulders. I taught Cell the fusion dance and instructed him to teach it to the Z Fighters at a opportune time. Before I entered the long closed-door training followed by leaving for the universe, I tied up all of my loose ends to make sure no one would get injured or die while I was missing. I even made sure the fish mutants from the ocean would never attack again. I made a treaty with their King Neptune. If they ever broke it, I would exterminate all of them. After finally making sure everything was done and nothing could interrupt my training, I entered the gravity chamber and started to try and fuse the techniques. It would be a long time before I came out of the chamber. Chapter 35. Finding a half in kindred spirits. I stopped my training and checked my power level. It increased towards 3,500,000,000. I could also enter the Supreme Bodhisattva mode at will now. The power level increase was maxed at 125 for my benevolent Buddha stand, due to me reaching the maximum capability of the mantra's first half. I thoroughly mastered it, so now there was nothing else I could increase my sacred Kai purity with. I walked outside of my training room and took a deep breath, taking in the purified air from Earth that was laced with Kai. The average power level of the Earthlings increased up to 2 to 3,000. My student's power level breached 100,000, and Goku's power level reached 600 million in his base by now. He might have even learned Super Saiyan 3 by now. Vegeta's power level increased towards 500 million, while Nappa's and Raditz' power level remained at 350 million. It seemed they stopped training as they were concerned with other things. The human Z Fighters started to catch up with the Saiyans, the strongest one being Tien at 310 million, Yamcha reached 280 million, while Roshi reached 300 million as well. Chiaotzu reached a power level of 100 million as well. Piccolo's power level was the most impressive, reaching 500 million just like Vegeta's. Marin and Ryu immediately hopped towards me. They both grew now from little toddlers to young kids. Marin was 8 years old, while Ryu was 7.5. By now Trunks should be 10 or 11, while Goten would be 9 or 10. It seemed quite a bit of time had gone by. I embraced them both and checked their Kai. Their power levels already reached 1 million each. It seemed Ryu was more talented than Marin. He also unlocked his dots, but his were lower in number than mine. He only had 4. I played with them for a bit and met with Lazuli and Jaika afterward. After some fun, it was time to adventure in the universe to get the latter half of the Buddha scripture. My first destination was the desert planet, where I found the first half of the scripture. But when I teleported towards the planet's coordinates and searched it, I couldn't find the statue engraved with the words again. I searched everywhere but the statue disappeared for some reason. I scratched my head as the sunlight reflected from it. The reflection started to shine on a patch of sand on the ground. There's some words were hidden which read, "Only those fated can get the second half. Follow the twin universe for the latter part. Follow the twin universe for the latter part." So the next part of the scripture wasn't even in Universe 7. I had to go to Universe 6, since Whis would come from time to time to try new food. I could use his help in this regard. I teleported back to Earth and waited. Whis was supposed to come in the next few days, to try a new dish. After he ate his fill I would ask him to take me to Universe 6. Whis came after a few days and ate some new dishes he didn't try before. His eyes were glittering as he was eating the food with his chopsticks. After he finished I approached him. He looked at me with a smile and said, "What would you require of me, Krillin-sen?" I chuckled awkwardly. This angel could see Troph me in an instant. After all, he was way stronger than Beerus, and wiser too. I told him directly, "There's something in our twin universe which I require to get to become stronger. I was wondering if you could take me there." Whis put a finger under his chin as if pondering my request before he nodded his head and answered, "It's quite easy for me to do this, but if Lord Champa doesn't want to let you explore his universe I won't interfere. Take this as me repaying you for all the food I ate up till now." He took his staff and told me to put a hand on his shoulder. I put a hand on his shoulder as he knocked his staff on the ground. Multicolored energy encased both of us, as we started to travel at extremely fast speeds in the universe. Whis turned to look back at me and said, "To go between universes will take me a while, at earliest 1 hour and most 2 hours. Just wait and meditate or something. Also make sure to not take your hand off my shoulder." I nodded my head at his words and just waited. 2 hours wasn't much time at all. It could go by in the blink of an eye. Whis was humming a little song as we continued to fly at an inestimable amount of speed. In theoretic terms, stars would appear and disappear in the blink of an eye. After 2 hours we were finally in Universe 6. A female-looking version of Whis appeared. Her clothes resembled Whis's, but they were green instead of red. She chuckled and said, "What's the occasion you visit my humble universe, brother?" Wiz smiled and said, "Eidos, it's been a while. Is Lord Champa awake?" Eidos shook her head, then took a look at me and said, "Oh, what's this?" "This guy gives off familiar Kai. It's just like that fatties from some millions of years ago. What's up with him, Wiz?" Wiz said nonchalantly, "He is here for the other half of that person's inheritance." Eidos nodded her head at Wiz and said, "You're in luck since Lord Champa is asleep, and I still owe Wiz a favor. I can just say I saw nothing." She just disappeared afterward. Wiz gave me a blue orb and said, "Break this orb when you want to leave the universe. I will come and take you back." He took his leave and disappeared in a multicolored Kai. I started to use my sacred Kai in an attempt to try and see if there was someone who could respond to the Kai, or if the inheritance would appear if it sensed a Kai by itself. I started to fly around in the galaxies of Universe 6. My golden aura encased me, as I tried to find the latter half of the mantra. It took me months and I visited many planets till I got a response. It was a pulse of sacred Kai coming from a nearby jungle-ish planet. I immediately flew towards the planet, and approached the sacred Kai radiance. After a few minutes I met with a man who stood upon a pole on one leg, the other crossed on his knee meditating. His chest was bare, which had a black tattoo on it, and he had some black training pants. His fists were both wrapped in bandages, and he was blindfolded with a red piece of cloth. His hair was tied with the same type of cloth into a very long ponytail. His mouth opened as he said in a deep and low voice, "Ah, a fellow disciple. Welcome." He jumped down from the pole and cupped his fists at me. I mirrored his actions and asked, "Fellow disciple, my name is Krillin. Are you the one who has the other half of the mantra?" The fellow chuckled and said, "Well met, Krillin. My name is Lee Sin, and yes, I do have the other part of the inheritance. You might not know, as our master is truly irresponsible on how he handled his inheritance, but the inheritance was supposed to be whole. Oh, whatever. There are two universes which both have a lack of Buddha position. That old fatty gave up on the position cause he couldn't be in two universes at once." He continued in his deep and low voice, "But with the two us, the position can be fulfilled in both universes. I cannot teach you the mantra directly though. You have to go under the same test that I had to get it. Unfortunately for me, I was young and rash, and the test took away my sight from me. Hopefully it won't damage you as it did me." I could sense Lee's power level. It was almost the same as mine. With the other part of the inheritance, he should have something similar to my benevolent Buddha stand. He didn't ask me for the other part of the inheritance. Maybe he is the reason the inheritance disappeared from the desert planet. He guided me towards a dark cave and said, "Here's how things will go. You enter the cave, which is a different dimension where the guardian of the cave will give you a test. Good luck." I entered the cave and darkness surrounded me immediately. I couldn't see or feel anything. Out of the darkness, two voices sounded at the same time. "Little lamb." Another one came. "Is he prey?" This one was masculine, gruff and deep. "Dear wolf, he came for that person's inheritance. Can't you sense the aura he exudes?" This voice was feminine and calm. The gruff and masculine voice continued, "Whatever, the test is your domain." I got excited about nothing. Out of the darkness, I could see the shadow of a dark wolf's head. It had a line that leaned to the right on his masked face. Out of the darkness came a masked humanoid lamb. She had the other half of the symbol on her mask. Both of these beings' eyes glowed a deep blue. Their pupilless eyes could see through my whole self. Lamb looked at me and said, "The test is simple. Defeat me." She took a bow out of nowhere and knocked some white arrows on it. Wolf started to pace around, seemingly wanting to take a bite out of me, but Lamb admonished him, "Wolf, this is not our domain. You can't join." Wolf growled and after that remained silent. I couldn't feel any amount of Kai from Lamb's body. She either had godly Kai or didn't use Kai at all. I transformed directly into my supreme Vidhasavada mode. All my aura adhered to my skin, giving it a little golden glow, and all of my dots fused, creating a now visible lotus flower on my forehead. Lamb nodded her masked hat at me and said, "This is the first half of the inheritance. You have trained fully in it. Very good." She knocked an arrow and shot it directly towards my eyes. I knew Holly became blind now. I grabbed the arrow and redirected it back at her. She dodged easily and started shooting arrows at me like a machine gun, while moving quickly around like an experienced hunter trying to close in his prey. I dodged the arrows I couldn't grab and tried to get close to her. She chuckled under her mask and continued to run around. She was extremely fast, and her arrows were deadly, but if I could get near her, I could defeat her easily. It seemed she was a long-range fighter. Making use of her not knowing my abilities fully, I used the after-image technique to get nearer to her, and charged a death beam on my finger. She leaned her head to the left and dodged the beam. She knocked another arrow on her bow and shot it directly to my forehead. I created a Kai barrier to stop the arrow, which was too fast to intercept, but it pierced through. It was ready to pierce directly through the middle of the lotus flower on my head, but I shouted and a beam of Kai discharged from the lotus flower, directly obliterating the arrow. I used instant transmission to directly appear behind her, and I driven a Kai sword directly through her abdomen. She started laughing and said, "Good job, you're way better than the last fellow who got here and got blinded on his first attempt." She dispersed into white mist and appeared near Wolf. She took an ancient-looking tome from Wolf's mouth. Wolf grumbled and said, If we didn't lose to that old fatty and his bet, we wouldn't have to appear here every time someone enters. We are not guard dogs. Lamb nodded her head and said, "A bet is a bet. Now Wolf, let's go, our job is done." 2 mantras were imparted. As per the old guy's instructions, our debt is finally finished. Wolf's tongue got out of his mouth as he howled and said, "Finally, no more interruptions in the hunt." They both disappeared in clouds of mist, one white and one black. I opened the ancient book as Buddhist characters appeared and entered my forehead. The lotus flower started to transform into a dragon tattoo with a crystal in the place where its eyes were supposed to be. My skin started to turn golden as my sacred Kai purity increased to 51%, but stopped suddenly. The transformation reverted to its normal looks, and the power increased just by a bit, due to the 1% purity increase. I got ejected out of the cave and met with Lee outside. His skin was golden, and his tattoos were glowing. His blindfold was off and his 2 eyes glowed goldenly. He smiled towards me and said, "While you were in there, I got the hang of the first part. The combination is what Master liked to call his Buddha God mode. You can call it whatever you want though." His power level was off the charts as he suddenly charged towards me. I transformed back up again, and started to fight him. During the fight, my transformation from before started to flicker in appearance as we clashed, but it never appeared completely. Our power levels were equal. He didn't have something similar to my benevolent Buddha stand. He only now unlocked the technique from comprehending the first part of the mantra. His Kai purity was the same as mine at 51%. The transformation came from the second part of the mantra. He learned it first, so he got to it faster than me. After a while of fighting back and forth, we disengaged and reverted. He smiled to me. Both his eyes were scarred as he put his blindfold back on. It seemed his regain of vision was temporary. He laughed and said, "It took you some time to finish the test. It was way faster than me though. 3 months and half, pretty good record. By now Majin Buu should have come to earth, right?" I cupped my fist towards Lee and took my leave. I got back to where Whis left me and destroyed the blue orb he left me. After a while, the multicolored Kai appeared, and we both disappeared again with it. Whis looked at me and said, "Congratulations Krillin-san, a bit more training, and you will truly reach the realm of the gods." I nodded to him and said, "Thank you Whis-san." He put a hand to his mouth as he laughed and continued, "Anyways, I can tell you that I felt some kind of strange power appear on Earth. If I'm not mistaken, it should be that ancient guy Majin Buu. He is even a bit older than Lord Beerus. Fortunately, with the powerhouses you have on Earth, he can be easily defeated." It seemed Majin Buu appeared on Earth but wasn't unsealed yet. That was good. I could watch from the sidelines and interfere if anything happened. After another 2 hours and a half, I got back to Earth just in time. I could feel lots of auras gather on Papaya Island. It was time for another Budokai Tenkaichi tournament chapter 36. Before Majin Buu was Babidi. Inside a hidden place on Earth enshrouded by a magic barrier was a little guy with wrinkled yellow skin, who was talking with a guy with an elongated head who wore armor and had an M tattooed on his forehead. Pui, those 2 humans should bring enough energy for Majin Buu's resurrection. So Popovich and Yamu was it. Anyways, afterward kill them both. Heard me Debur. Out of the darkness, a devil with red skin, horns and elongated ears appeared. He also had an M tattooed on his forehead. He wore a light blue suit which covers his entire body minus his muscle-bound chest, along with a white spiked cape, a white circular belt, and white boots. He bowed towards the little yellow guy and said, "Of course, Master Babidi, after we made use of the trash we will dispose of it." Babidi started to laugh sinisterly. Back to Papaya Island, everyone started to gather around me as I let my Kai out so they can find me. I was already on my way to keeping the Kai in my body to reach its true divine potential. Keeping it inside, and not leaking it at all, helped me purify it at the same time. Goku immediately appeared. His power level was already at 750 million. He smiled towards me and put a hand on my shoulder. Behind him was Gohan, who was now as tall as Goku, and he changed his haircut. It was now spiked up a little bit like when he transformed into a Super Saiyan. Goten was behind Goku, clutching the hems of his pants, looking at me with wariness. From behind me came Lazuli, Jaika, Ryu and Marin. Goten started to brighten up seeing his 2 playmates. I hugged both Jaika and Lazuli. It has been quite some time since I left them for Universe 6. After this whole thing was done, some special activities were needed. They both started to blush at my gaze. They realized what my eyes indicated. Goku scratched his head and asked, "Are you too sick? Why are you two so red in the face?" Both of them returned to normal at Goku's words. Old Goku never changed up till now. Even though he was a bit smarter, he was still clueless regarding other things. Yamcha, Tien, Vegeta and the others also made their way over. Trunks was with them as well. Even Hercule and Videl made their way over. Videl waved in Gohan and grabbed his arm when she got over to him. Gohan scratched his head awkwardly and smiled. The kids would join the newly made junior division, while the adults would join the adult division. Lazuli and Jaika wouldn't join since there was no reason to. The junior division's most exciting fights would be Trunks, Goten's, Ryu's and Marin's. Since the junior division would fight first, I decided to ignore the others' kids' fight and just focus on the main events. Trunks won all of his fights easily. The same could be said about Goten, Marin and Ryu. They were overshadowing every kid in the tournament. Finally, after 30 fights, it was the time for Goten and Trunks to fight. Marin and Ryu were also fighting in an adjacent stage. The winner of those fights would get to fight in the finals. The Goten and Trunks fight was just like in canon, both going super after warming up. As for Ryu versus Marin, Ryu immediately activated his dots, 4 dots shining on his forehead. His power level increased by 16 times. He immediately struck forward to Marin, but she dodged easily as a red aura started to encase her. She was using the Kaiken at the maximum of her capability. Ryu smiled towards his sister and started to use his Kaiken as well. Marin didn't unlock the dots, so she couldn't keep up with her brother, even though her base power level was higher, and she was older. Marin's face started to scrunch up as a tall, well-built man appeared behind her. Its skin was purple, and had small bits of gold around its body. It has long, flowing hair with a darker shade above its eyes, and on the bridge of its nose, blurring the distinction between its hair and head. The spaces under its eyes and on its cheeks and chin are darker color and divided clearly from the space around its nose and mouth. It wears a cap on its chin, and a metallic headband in 3 pieces, the central piece of which is shaped as a vertical ellipse. Her stand was pretty imposing. I didn't know what it represented though, maybe that was the quality of her soul. A loud voice immediately came out of the stand's mouth as it started to punch towards Ryu at high speeds. Or. The barrage of punches was only after images at the high speed it attacked. Ryu chuckled and said, "Oh who sister, you are approaching me instead of running away." Marin smirked and said, "I can't beat your ass without approaching you." Ryu then stopped chuckling and said in a serious tone of voice, "Then come as close as you like." The similarly muscular figure appeared behind Ryu. It wears a headpiece covering its face to below the place of its nose, slanting at a steep angle from the base of its forehead to a peak situated above the rear of its head by about half its height, leaving the face of an inverted triangle visible to the front. It wears small simple twin diving cylinders on its back. The stand immediately started to blow as it started its rush attack. Muta. They both started clashing as Ryu started to overpower Marin. It seemed his stand was superior. He was ready to punch a hole through her, when he stopped and said with a smile on his face, "You lost, sister." Marin just sighed, cupped her fists and left the stage. Ryu waved at me with a huge smile on his face. He was proud that he beat his older sister. It was expected he would win. Marin started to change with time, and became less and less interested in martial arts, but Ryu just continued to train. He liked it, but I'm not sure, as he grew older, would he still like it. It was time for a fight between Ryu and Trunks. The fight was similar to the anime, but Trunks won in the end. Of course, Trunks was older, and trained by Vegeta, who was pretty much a slave trainer. If Bulma wouldn't stop him, he would run Trunks in the ground like a sergeant from hell. Ryu and Trunks both cupped their fists at each other, as Trunks immediately transformed in his Super Saiyan state. Ryu used his dots and the Kaiken to rival him in power, and they started to clash. Trunks had the upper hand in experience as he was older and trained every day by Vegeta, but Ryu had his special stand. The Yellow Man appeared behind Ryu as suddenly time seemed to stop for a few seconds. I could shrug off the effect, so could the stronger Z fighters, but Trunks couldn't. This was similar to Hit's time skip ability. I studied the stand's ability for future references. Maybe I could learn to skip time from this. Trunks was hit 4 times in the chest and 2 times in the stomach in the stop time, Ryu immediately said afterward. Time has started again. Trunks got blown over by the punches and skidded over the stage, early getting blown out. He coughed a bit of saliva, but stopped himself near the edge and threw himself at Ryu. Ryu put his stand in front of him, both arms crossed in an X to take the attack head on. Trunks punched off the stand and hit Ryu in the head, taking him out. Unfortunately, Trunks was still stronger in the end. I couldn't train Ryu every day as Vegeta did to Trunks. Trunks fed Ryu a Senzu Bean, and he got up. They both left the stage. It was time for the adults division. The first fight was Yamcha versus Tien, in which they fought at a pretty equal pace, but in the end, Tien won due to his racial technique, which increased his power level. Piccolo fought a strange guy who I knew was Supreme Kai, but I decided to not comment on it. Piccolo gave up after Supreme Kai explained to him some things. Videl fought Sopopovich and Yamu, the 2 Babidi drones, but now they both got their ass kicked so hard they couldn't do jack. Videl trained with Gohan every day at the dojo, so her power level reached above 200,000. Both of them were above 50,000, they couldn't do anything to her. Gohan fought Videl afterward and won. Sopopovich and Yamu still lingered around even though they were defeated. They looked for an opportunity to drain someone of their energy. Goku versus Vegeta was the next fight, and this one would be the most interesting. Goku smirked towards Vegeta while Vegeta scoffed at Goku and said, "Kakarot, it's time for us to settle our debt. I have achieved another transformation, and it's time for me to beat you." Goku smiled at Vegeta and said, "Oh, Vegeta, you ascended as well." Vegeta immediately grew grim from Goku's words. It seemed he learned Super Saiyan 3 as well. He ignored him afterward and started to power up. Blonde hair spiked up in the electricity around him. Goku did the same. Vegeta immediately started to scream as his power level increased at enormous amounts. The whole planet started to shake as his hair grew long like rabbits, and his eyebrows were gone. Goku immediately started to do the same. Both ascended at the Super Saiyan 3 state and launched at each other. They knew the form took a lot of energy, so they had a very short time delay to fight. They punched each other in the face as they smirked. Their power levels were pretty equal at the moment. Goku couldn't fuse Ikari mode with Super Saiyan 2 yet. Let's not even talk about 3, so their power levels didn't have a huge difference between them. They were both geniuses of fighting, so they didn't back down from each other at all. A kick which was matched there, a punch which collided with another making shockwaves appear in the air. I, of course, stopped the shockwaves before they could hurt anyone. As the fight continued, Yamu and Supopovich eyed the two of them in fear, but as their power levels started to go down due to the extreme expense of the Super Saiyan 3 transformation, the duo's eyes started to shine. They both reverted to their normal form exhausted. Vegeta fell on his butt while Goku still stood tall. It seemed Goku still won by a little here. Immediately while their guard was down, Yamu and Supopovich used a gore to absorb their energy and run away. They had some special magic cast on them so they couldn't be sensed. I could, of course, follow them, but I decided not to. Majin Buu had to be restored and brought to the good side. He would make a good ally. He was just a misguided fat blob of gum. He wasn't evil, he was just so innocent he didn't realize his actions hurt other people. Vegeta cursed under his breath as he was out of energy, and Goku looked serious. I threw 2 senzu beans to them which were now in abundance. They both ate them and got up. Supreme Kai Shin showed himself, and started to explain about Majin Buu and Babidi. I made my way down, and when Shin sensed my power he gasped and said, "Ah, fellow god, did you sense Majin Buu's arrival as well? Wait, you, this Kai is foreign and familiar at the same time." It seemed he could recognize the Kai, but didn't know where it was from. Well, I couldn't blame him, the other case couldn't teach him jack, since they were absorbed by Buu. The poor guy didn't even know what his earrings were for. He cleared his throat as Kibito was analyzing me from the side and continued. "Okay, I can sense where these two are going. It should be the best if we stopped Buu from getting out with this fellow. God, here we could do it easy peasy. I'm not sure about his position, but his hidden power is immense from what can I sense." The Supreme Kai had good senses if he could feel my Supreme Behasavata mode. I knew where Babidi was hiding, so I just decided to teleport everyone there instead of making Shin become our guide. We were welcomed with the sight of Babidi killing Yamu and Supopovich by exploding both of them, while he took Igor thing filled with the remnants of Vegeta's and Goku's energy. Babidi immediately screamed, "The Burr, come and take care of these intruders, while I unseal Buu with this. The energy is enough, but it would take a bit of time." The Burr smirked and came forward. He was a pretty strong guy, but Gohan would be able to beat him very easily. As on cue, Gohan came forward already in his Super Saiyan state ready to fight. The Burr smirked as the M tattoo on his forehead started to shine red. I narrowed my eyes, so this was the correct way to use the Kai storage magic. The Burr shouted as he started to spit at Gohan, trying to transform him into a stone statue. Gohan dodged the spit and appeared in front of the Burr, punching him directly in the gut. The Burr smiled evilly and embraced Gohan. He was ready to splatter him full of spit. Gohan, disgusted, immediately powered up to a Super Saiyan 2 as well, and obliterated him into nothing. In the other world, King Yima was muttering about his mahogany table, and how much he wanted to see his children, when Dabur appeared in front of him, halo and everything. Yima narrowed his eyes and said, "You go to heaven, hell is too good for you." Dabur was then caught by some chains from above trying to drag him upwards. There were angels singing and light of good omen, but Dabur was trying his best to escape clawing at the white chains with everything he got, but he still got dragged into heaven. Back on Earth, we entered Babidi's building and tried to find him. It was like a maze, but I easily solved it, along the way killing Pui Pui and some green giant monster who ate light. Majin Buu was already starting to hatch from a giant pink egg. Babidi rubbed his hands as he waited. We entered at the same time Buu got out of his shell. Just like in the anime, he was a big guy with pink skin who wore a purple cape. White pants had some holes in his head, and protrusions which looked like a small tail. He had his eyes closed and an ever-present smile on his face. His power level was high, but Super Saiyan 3 Goku could still beat him if he didn't have a time limit. At the same time in Hell, a demon with headphones was walking around the machinery which was purifying sin. He tripped and hit the machinery with his horn which poked a small hole in it. He seemed flustered as the sin started to engulf him, transforming him into a giant blob of yellow. He started to shout in a childish voice, "Janemba, Janemba." King Kai immediately got alerted and contacted me. "Krillin, there's a new demon emergence in Hell. Need your help ASAP." Well, peace was good for some time, but I have work to do again now. I hope there wouldn't be any problems with Majin Buu. Well, I had to go and deal with Janemba. Supreme Kai Shin narrowed his eyes and nodded at me. It seemed he got the message as well. I teleported to Hell, and there I saw my next opponent and the machine that was getting empty. It started to engulf Janemba as his power level increased, but he remained the same. It shouldn't be too hard to beat this guy. Chapter 37. Buu and Janemba. The yellow fat blob with holes in around his chest and stomach area was jumping up and down at me and continuously said, "Janemba, Janemba." He was just like a Pokemon who could only say his name. I could feel the sin starting to strengthen him, and his power level was still increasing at fast speeds. I couldn't use any fatal technique on him though. Just like with Rost, the sin took an innocent as a host to manifest itself in a demonic form. I'm not sure why it took this form, however. The best way to purify the sin and not hurt the demon inside would be to use the spirit bomb. I started to gather energy in my palm, but Janemba didn't want that. He jumped towards me with his giant fat body, trying to tackle me down. I had to use the after image technique to flash around, while I kept one hand up to gather the energy. I mixed it with some of my sacred Kai, and it started to take a rainbow quality. Janemba attacked me again, but I clenched my hand with the mini spirit bomb inside, making it even smaller. I used instant transmission to appear directly near him, and drove my sacred Kai infused spirit bomb directly into his stomach. He immediately started to cry as steam started to blow out of his holes. He spits out a demon with headphones and punk clothes. I grabbed the demon and teleported him a safe distance away with some other warden demons. Before he could thank me, I teleported back to Janemba. It seemed things weren't done yet. The fat yellow blob started to shrink and became human size. He gained yellow ice glare, upper armor color being dull purple, and his skin tone and tail are bright red. He also gains 2 dull purple curved horns on his head, while gaining dull purple wristlets, pelvic armor, and ankle supports. He immediately started to shout something which I couldn't understand, and he grabbed a purple handle out of air. This was spatial manipulation. The sword was long and the base of it was red, while the handle was a deep purple. He started to laugh at me, showing his long canines. He started to flicker out of existence like a lagging Windows XP folder. It was just like a glitched game. I couldn't sense him anymore. He appeared in front of me ready to drive his sword through my chest. I dodged it instinctively, and shot a Kai blast towards his face. He immediately used his spatial powers again to disappear. I waited patiently, trying to guess where else he would come from, and made a plan on how to counter his ability. Back on Earth, Fat Bu looked at Babidi like a child would look at a toy. Babidi immediately tried to use his mind control magic. Unknowingly to him, it did not affect. Babidi started to talk. "You attack these guys." You replied with a childish voice. "Are they strong?" Babidi looked flustered at the question. Shouldn't his mind control give him complete control of Bu? What changed? He didn't know that the mind control he prided himself in got his father killed, and that's why Bu was sealed in the first place. Well, that and the Supreme Kai's sacrifice. Bu's smile immediately whitened as he looked at the Z fighters and said, "You guys play with Bu, okay? If you aren't great at playing, you become candy." The human Z fighters immediately used all of their techniques, while the Saiyans turned Super Saiyan 2 directly. Bu said, "Einy miny miny mo, I choose you." He pointed towards Gohan and launched himself directly to him. Vegeta, Goku, and the others tried to interfere, but Bu pushed them back with his gummy body, and steam started to get out of his head. Not fair, not fair. You all fight Bu by ganging on Bu. Not fair." He started to flicker as he multiplied. His power level very little reduced and started to laugh. Better now, Bu can play better." Cell was watching from the distance, eyeing the pink creature with weariness. His power level in base now was 1 billion, and he fully mastered the Kaiken, and his stand to perfection. Behind him appeared the original Cell perfect form. His power level increased by 50 times. He was ready to swoop in and save the human Z fighters if anything happened. I ordered him to. Goku and Vegeta clashed with the clones, but they were overpowered. Gohan couldn't do much if even Goku and Vegeta were getting their ass beaten. The human Z fighters were at an even higher disadvantage. Bu was getting bored. He immediately pointed the protrusion from his head at Yamcha and said, "You boring, become candy now, bye bye." Yamcha growled as he fused the stand with his body. Fur started to appear on him as he transformed into a werewolf. He dodged a candy beam and charged a spirit ball towards Bu. Bu just ate the spirit ball and said, "Not sweet enough." He punted Yamcha in the face with an enlarged fist and knocked him out. Other Bu clones fought with the others' human Z fighters. While the Bu clone was fooling around about his victory, Cell appeared out of nowhere and driven a fully charged special beam cannon off his chest. He took Yamcha from the ground and flashed away. Bu was angry as more steam was going out of the holes of his head and he started to screech. "You guys not fun." Bu angry and hungry. Seeing he couldn't defeat them in the short run, he pointed his head appendage at Babidi. Babidi started to sweat drop as he said with a shaky voice, Bu, what are you doing? I'm your master, you can't." Bu just said, "Bu hungry." And he transformed Babidi into a gingerman and ate him. Bu patted his belly and recalled all his clones. He looked annoyed, and he said with a no so cheery voice anymore, "Bu bored of you, if you not stronger, Bu makes you all candy now." All of the remaining fighters grimaced. Cell knew that if things came to worst, he should help them escape and teach them the fusion dance so they can win. Goku and Vegeta grinned as they started to shout, both transformings in a Super Saiyan 3 at the same time. Bu looked curiously at the both of them, nodding his head as he felt their power. They both charged at him at the same time, and Goku hit him in the face, and Vegeta in the stomach. Afterward, Goku flashed above Bu and grabbed him by his appendage, and threw him upwards into the sky. Vegeta was already charging his final flash, and shot it at Bu, when he was thrown upwards. Bu became pieces of gum that started to rain from the sky. Goku and Vegeta reverted to their normal forms inside. A laugh could be heard from every individual piece of gum as they stuck back together. Hahaha, you guys fun, Buu can play with you guys a lot. Jiaosu took 2 senzu beans from his hat and threw them at Goku and Vegeta. Goku and Vegeta looked at each other with serious eyes. They knew they couldn't destroy Buu thoroughly at their level. They needed to master Super Saiyan 3 for that to happen. They could delay him and fight to a standstill, even blow him up, but they could not blow every piece of him up. They both ate the senzu beans, and they didn't know what to do. Suddenly Cell appeared near them and told everyone, "Guys, follow me. I have a way to defeat him. Unfortunately, we have to let him free for some time." Buu looked at Cell with wonder in his eyes, not being sure what he was, and asked, "Buu wants to play with you too, can you play?" Cell responded to Buu, "I can get you a stronger partner to play with, but you have to wait, can you do that?" Buu put a hand under his chin and thought hard and responded after a few seconds, "Is he stronger than these two?" He pointed towards Goku and Vegeta. Cell nodded his head and responded to his question, "Way I stronger?" Buu smiled again, very white, his teeth were showing. "Buu can wait, but Buu needs to eat too. If you guys don't give Buu food, Buu can get himself." He was ready to fly away and make people into candy. Gohan immediately stopped him by appearing in front of him and said, "We have plenty of food and a place where you can wait, please don't go." Buu nodded his head at Gohan and said, "Well, Buu will follow if you have good food." Gohan's back was drenched with sweat. He knew he was no match for the pink blob. He needed everyone to make food for Buu so things would work well. Cell took Buu to the lookout with everyone else, while Gohan invited his mother, Videl, and Hercule to help with the food. They also had Bulma get some cooks and patissiers, so they can make Buu food and sweets. Both Hercule and Videl were good at cooking due to them working at their restaurant for most of their life. Of course, Hercule quit it in the other half to follow his dream as a martial artist, but Videl still helped from time to time. And Gohan thought her food was heavenly. Hercule and Videl flew at high speeds towards the lookout. Hercule had a tiny dog in his hand which Videl was observing, and she said, "Dad, what's with the dog? Do we have to feed that Majin Buu?" The dog looked pretty bad, his left hind leg was injured. Hercule answered his daughter with an awkward laugh. "Well, I saw this little guy and I couldn't abandon him. Master's friends have these green beans which can heal you fast. I wanted one, so the dog could get healed." Videl looked at her father and nodded her head. Hercule was a good guy even if his appearance didn't show it. They both arrived at the lookout, and Majin Buu was playing around when he saw the dog and Hercule and said, "A doggy funny hair man, can Buu play with doggy?" Hercule looked around, but Cell was teaching the Z fighters the fusion dance, so they didn't have time to entertain Buu. Hercule thought that the guy didn't look that evil, so he gave him the dog. The dog started to lick Buu's face. As Buu observed the dog, he saw that it's injured and he said, "You feel bad? Buu makes you feel better." He healed the dog with his Kai, and the dog immediately started to run around and bark. Buu started to follow him and play around. Hercule afterward immediately started to cook with the help of Videl. Buu started to salivate at the aromas that were assaulting his nostrils. Buu immediately sat down with the puppy in his lap and waited for the food. Kami was watching from inside the lookout and sighed to himself. Piccolo was with him and asked Kami, "What's up, old man, why are you sighing?" Kami responded, "This guy Majin Buu, he is innocent, but there's a deep evil hidden inside of him. We don't have to kill him. I can feel that he also has some bits of sacred Kai hidden in him. Maybe there's something hidden about him." Piccolo looked at Kami with a questioning gaze and asked, "Old man, how would you even separate the evil from him? It's impossible unless he does it himself as you did." Kami nodded his head and said, "Maybe we could convince him with food. It looks like he enjoys it a lot from what I see." And enjoying it he was. He was engulfing food like a tornado, not stopping at all. Whenever a plate with food was shown, it would be engulfed by his mouth, plate included. Hercule, the cooks, and Videl sweat dropped. Popo was looking at Majin Buu from a corner with a glint in his eyes, and muttered to himself, "Such a pure evil inside this guy. I could use it." Then he shook his head and sighed. "Too bad that noseless freak exists. I can't do anything to him. What a freaking maggot." Vegeta was red in the face. He was trying to learn the fusion dance, but he didn't like the idea of fusing with Kakarot or anyone else. He wanted to go into the chamber and try to master Super Saiyan 3. Goku was of the same idea as Vegeta, but Mr. Popo barred them the entrance for some reason. While they trained back in hell, I was fighting Janemba with all I got. From time to time I would hit an empty space just to hit Janemba in his face. I started to guess where Janemba would come out of space. It was just like how Goku guessed where Hit would try to attack him during the time he skipped. It was, of course, way easier than what Goku did. It didn't take me much time to start to be able to hit him more and more. Janemba started to screech hysterically as he put a finger forward and drew it in the air, making shards of Kai that looked like needles fly at me. I mimicked his technique, and the shards collided in mid-air, destroying each other. This fight had gone long enough. I learned quite a few things from Janemba, and by observing his space manipulation I learned how to do it as well. For now, it was time for the personification of sin to be purified. I turned on my supreme Behasavata mode, as the dots on my forehead morphed into a dragon with crystals where his eyes are supposed to be. The dragon's crystal eyes started to shine as my power increased to the realm of gods. At 52% Kai purity, I'm pretty sure I hit levels of power comparable to Super Saiyan God Goku or even a bit higher than him. This amount of power couldn't be counted in numbers anymore. Janemba screeched and tried to run away using his space manipulation. Unfortunately for him, it was too late. I appeared near him before he could truly dissipate into space, and threw a right-hook infused with Sacred Kai towards his disappearing stomach. It transformed into dust, then into purified sin, which flew back into the machine. The machine started to roar to life as I thoroughly destroyed Janemba, and all of the sin purified itself. I closed the hole into the machine with my magic Kai and materialization. The pipes of the machine were going directly upwards into the yellow clouds, and even higher into heaven. Inside heaven we could observe Dabur, but he was different now. He looked like a pious and pure follower. He was walking along a big patch of flowers and smelling them. Nearby there were the pipes of the machine that was purifying sins in hell. Out of the pipes, the form of Janemba appeared, but he was different. He took an even more humanoid form, and his skin was a normal white instead. The only thing that would link him to the old Janemba was his headpiece and the sword he held in his hand. He bowed towards Dabur and said in a clear voice, "Ah Dabur, it seems you have gone to heaven as well." Dabur nodded and continued to smell the flowers and enjoy life in heaven. He looked like hell didn't exist for him anymore. I teleported back to Earth and felt all the powers on the lookout, so I teleported back there. Shin was also there watching as the others trained in the fusion technique. He was expectant of how they would defeat Majin Buu. He immediately got a message from King Kai, nodded towards me and said, "It seems you did your job perfectly back in hell. I'm not sure what god position you got, but keep doing what you do." I sweat dropped at the Supreme Kai's lack of knowledge. Poor thing, I must unseal the Elder Kai, so he could teach this youngster some things. After Buu ate tons of food, he patted his belly and burped. He looked at the Z fighters as they did a strange dance and said, "Buu can wait for even more for the strong fighter. Actually, Buu will just take a nap here." He started to sleep like a rock, a snot bubble coming out of his nose. Everyone sweat dropped this guy's cell, and the others were hard at work to master the fusion dance, while I was contacted by King Kai. "Good work on the hell job, my disciple. And for what I heard from Supreme Kai Shin Sama, you unlocked your God Kai already." He started to sniffle, and said how his disciple already grew so fast. He ignored the threat of Majin Buu, seemingly trusting in me to save everyone. After a few days of training, they all perfected the fusion dance and were ready to fight. Majin Buu woke up as the snot bubble burst, and he yawned. Vegeta and Goku immediately started to dance. They did it perfectly. As their power levels were lowered at the same amount, they touched their fingers, and a white flash appeared. I always wondered what the fusion of Vegeta and Goku would look with the fusion dance. Vegeta was cool, but what would come out of the fusion dance instead of a Pitar? I was answered by the sound of their fused voice. "Yasha, Majin Buu, Vegeta is here, be ready to get your ass kicked." They immediately powered up to their Super Saiyan form, and took a combination of Goku's and Vegeta's stance. Majin Buu smiled at Vegeta as he felt the combined power of Goku and Vegeta. He started to power up himself as steam started to come out of holes on his head. He immediately started to change from his fat self as he became buff. His power level started to rival Vegeta's, but that was only Vegeta's in his base form. Buu started to laugh and said, "All that food made Buu stronger, let's play." They both launched at each other and started the fight. Chapter 38. Vegeta vs Buu was pretty short. After Vegeta and Buu clashed in mid-air, they dashed backwards due to the impact. Buu was at a disadvantage and flew away farther than Vegeta. Even though he was strong, he wasn't on the level of Super Saiyan Vegeta. Vegeta smirked and started to charge a Big Bang Kamehameha. He put two hands forward, and a ball of blue Kai appeared above his outstretched hands. He charged it as it started to revolve, and it shot at Buu at high speeds. Buu shouted as a beam of Kai appeared out of his mouth, and clashed mid-air with Vegeta's beam. Vegeta smirked as he shouted, and his power level increased. His beam started to push back Buu's, till it engulfed him thoroughly. Blobs of pink reconstructed themselves back into the buff Buu. Another bout of anger came out of Buu as he shouted, "You know fun, Buu likes to win." Hot steam started to come out of his head holes. I observed him making sure if evil Buu came out right now, I would send him on his way. Kami interrupted my thoughts by talking with me telepathically. "Krillin, this is a good situation to remove the evil side of Majin Buu. Hit him with some of your sacred Kai right now." I could see that he was right. Buu's guard was down as he powered up. I charged a revolving ball of sacred Kai into my hand, and threw it at his stomach. It hit directly as he started to cry. Buu doesn't feel right. He started to become a mishmash of things as a black-gray piece of gum was ejected out of him. His power level reverted to normal, and his buff form was removed, making him go back to his fat form. The black-gray piece took a different form than the normal Buu. He was skinny, and had the same outfit, but in different colors. He grinned evilly at fat Buu, and was ready to launch himself at him and absorb him. I appeared in front of evil Buu and kicked him in the chin, launching him away. Vegeta didn't know what to do, but suddenly Vegeta defused, and both Goku and Vegeta looked awkwardly at each other. The normal time of the fusion dance was 30 minutes, but it gone down the more energy was expended. Super Saiyan 1 made it 10 minutes, 2 would give the Saiyans 5 minutes, and Super Saiyan 3 would give them a maximum of 3 minutes. Of course, Katara wouldn't have this weakness as it was a permanent fusion. They could still defuse with the help of the Dragon Balls though. Evil Bu narrowed his eyes at me, warily looking at me as I encased myself fully in Sacred Kai. There was no need to keep this Bu alive. Suddenly the mantras in my head started to ring, and they said in an old but jolly voice, "This can be your first work in Universe 7, my disciple." The mantras transformed into different words which entered my consciousness directly. It was a technique to reincarnate an evil person by purifying their sin and sending them in the reincarnation cycle directly. The old voice continued, "I have high expectations of you. That Lee Sin is a bit hotter-headed. It would take more time for him to mature, but for you at most 10 years would be enough to reach the peak that even I couldn't get to." I immediately started to use the technique that was imparted to me by the voice. I started by doing some strange hand seals, at which Bu immediately tried to run away from seeing them. He felt great danger from the hand seals. His senses were very good, unfortunately for him. I activated my Supreme Bahisavata mode and slammed my hands that were in the final hand seal directly on his forehead. He started to shout and cry in agony as foul-smelling smoke came out of him. It was dark, and gave the feeling of hatred and destruction. After a while no smoke came out of him anymore, and he had a serene look on his face. He seemed enlightened as he started to disintegrate on the spot. He bowed to me as his whole being turned to dust. He was on his way to get reincarnated. The old and jolly voice continued after everything was done. It was way weaker than before. It seemed this was its last message. Your job in the universe is to keep the balance between the gods. The Lord of Destruction should only destroy planets with no future, while the Supreme Case should make a habitable planet and race every 100 years. They can't interfere in mortal affairs unless it's an emergency which could destroy the universe. He continued in a low tone of voice. You are the guardian who balances yin and yang in the universe. You will also have to reincarnate evil souls with high potential. We can't let them stay forever in hell or heaven. The residents of heaven deserve their rest, but if they want to be reincarnated they can appeal to you. However, the residents of hell need to be tortured till all their sin is expunged before you use the technique I taught you on them to reincarnate them. Depending on the sin, it can take even up to thousands of years. After all of the information was transmitted, a weak sigh resounded in my consciousness, and he said his last words. I'm impressed with you. Even though you aren't from this universe originally, you did a good job. At first you were selfish and uncaring, but you grew a lot. Continue doing what you are doing. Farewell. The voice disappeared and wouldn't be heard of again. Back on the lookout, Vegeta, Goku and the Z fighters were eyeing Bu playing with the puppy that Hercule brought. It seemed his violent tendencies were completely gone. The puppy licked Bu's face as he laughed. Kami walked from the lookout's building and said in a loud voice so everyone could hear him. With the help of Krillin and his special Kai, imagine Bu has been cleaned off his evil side. It's similar on how me and Piccolo were. Unlike me and Piccolo, however, the death of his evil side didn't affect him at all. Even though he is still as strong as before, he is pretty harmless now, and he can be taught to differentiate right from wrong. Hercule looked at Bu and how he bonded with the puppy and said, "This big guy seems to like our food. I'd like to take him with me and teach him." Everyone looked at each other unsure of what to say. It's true Hercule was pretty strong, but still extremely weak compared to the Z fighters. Even Xiaosu could transform him into a meat patty by blowing at him. Bu looked towards Hercule, nodded his head and said, "Bu likes you. What's your name, funny hair man?" Hercule puffed up his chest and said, "My name's Hercule, and if you come with me and you don't harm anyone else anymore unless they are evil, you can eat food like this whenever you want." Well, those words would put a big dent on his finances. I observed from nearby and decided to finance the food consumption of the Hercule household from now on. They weren't wealthy enough to be able to feed Majin Buu, unlike in the original where Hercule was a martial arts legend. Now he was just a humble instructor at my dojo. I didn't shortchange my employees. The pay was pretty good, but it sure as hell wasn't enough to comply with Buu's eating habits. I came back to their view, smiled and nodded my head towards Kami and everyone else, indicating that it wasn't a bad idea to let Hercule take care of Bu. It was like destiny tied these two. Bu looked towards me, and his tiny eyes opened up and narrowed before closing them back up. His facial expression with his narrowed eyes wasn't that happy, but it returned to normal, and he came towards me, patted me on the shoulder and said in his normal voice, "Well, Bu is happy, that part of him is gone. Bu and unhappy, that his power is lower." It seemed Bu cared about his power. This wasn't the same Bu as the original, since this one had fewer interactions with Hercule. It seemed that I gained a rival. Goku smiled while Vegeta scoffed and left. There was nothing for him here anymore. The earth was safe, so he didn't care anymore. Goku looked as Vegeta left and put 2 fingers on his forehead and waved at us. It seemed he was going to leave as well. Everyone started to leave from the lookout to go back to their training and activities. I left as well and met with Jaika and Lazuli. Only Kami and Piccolo were left on the lookout. Popo was nowhere in sight. Kami sighed and said in an aged voice, "Things become harder and harder for this old body. If there was someone else who could take over the Earth's guardian post." Sai Piccolo started to think about something. He narrowed his eyes as Nail's voice started to echo in his head. "You can always find a young Namekian who wants to leave. I recommend Den, the young man who is Guru's new guardian. I think he should be done with that old man already." Piccolo looked at Kami and told him about Nail's thoughts, but before he could finish, Kami put a hand on Piccolo's shoulders, and he became a blue aura which encased Piccolo. Piccolo clenched his fists as he shouted out loud, "What power, I'm great, I feel it, I can do it." Both Kami and Nail started to snicker in his head. Piccolo forgot about the two people in his consciousness and started to blush. Popo appeared out of nowhere and looked around, not spotting Kami at all. He looked at Piccolo with narrowed eyes and threw him off the lookout. It seemed Popo's power level increased by a lot if he could throw away the super duper Namekian Piccolo now. His power level was a bit higher even than the Super Saiyan 3's. Popo snorted and said, "Now that no one is on the lookout anymore, I can call all the bitches here." Popo got a phone out of nowhere and said, "Bitches, it's Big Daddy Popo here, we changing headquarters." Popo changed from his genie look into a purple suit and glasses and a fedora. He used his incredibly fast flying carpet to take scantily clad women from around the world and left them at the lookout. When he got everyone on the lookout, he said out in a loud voice, "Okay bitches, here's the thing, my home is free now for some time, and I can increase the profit I make from your asses by using my carpet to fly you at your destination. You will now be milked like cows. Any disagreements?" All the women intoned in a coarse voice, "No, Great Daddy Popo." Popo smiled, showing his one tooth, and said, Grady picked up his ringing phone and took a blue-haired, scantily clothed young lady and said, "Marin, you go to customer 6359. Marin saluted and left. Till Den made his way to the lookout. Strange things would happen on it. Things that children shouldn't hear or see. After Piccolo got off the high of his power level, he remembered that there were no Dragon Balls anymore. It had been quite a few days, so he decided to come to me and tell me about everything. I nodded my head at him. I wasn't sure when Piccolo and Kami would fuse, but it seemed it happened. Whatever, I could just get Den from Namek right. I teleported to Namek and I could hear Super Kami Guru. "You want to leave too? You took the oath." Den looked at Guru with what seemed anger and said, "This is the last drop, Super Kami Guru. I have done many things I'm ashamed of under your tyrannical rule. I'm leaving." Den looked forward and saw me. He immediately ran over and said to me, "Let's get the hell out of here." Super Kami Guru seemed like he wanted to get off his chair. I didn't linger around to watch the monstrosity get out and teleported back to Earth. The lookout was full of unwashed panties and cigarette butts. I looked around and thought of what the hell happened here. Popo came faster than lightning, and before I could blink my eyes, everything was spotlessly clean. He coughed a bit in his fist and said, "So this is the new Earth's guardian. I will teach him the required skills. Come after me." I left Den with Popo. Hopefully, Den won't be scarred for life. But I could hear them laughing in chorus behind me and saying that they would make a great team. I also heard something about modifying the dragon and making it be able to grant 2 wishes. I sighed and left the two at their own devices. Both Ryu and Marin jumped in my embrace the moment I teleported back. I chuckled and played with them a bit, then left towards the training room. My Sacred Kai was already at 53% purity, just 47% left, and I would master the mantra. I then could be able to truly take on the title and responsibilities of the Buddha position in Universe 7. There weren't many things left to do. Beerus wasn't going to become a problem as he liked our food too much to destroy Earth, and after I mastered my Sacred Kai fully, I could try to reincarnate the Cold family and make them good. So there wouldn't be any resurrection F. The only big problems that were still existing would be Zamasu and the Tournament of Power. Chapter 39. Unlocking the potential within. I got up from my position of being cross-legged, scratched my head and yawned. Training in high gravity started to lose its efficiency. If I increased the gravity by too much, it would take an effect on the environment, so I couldn't increase it by too much on Earth, or even in the universe. I might create a black hole and damage the universe. I'm not sure how Zeno or the Grand Priest would like that. It was time to unseal the Elder Kai. I let him stay in his sword for a bit more than he should have. I teleported to the Kai's world. Shin and Kibito were surprised at me knowing the coordinates of the world, but remembered how I had got Kai as well and said, "As a fellow deity, I welcome you in our humble realm. Krillin, would you mind telling us what's your position?" The Kai is familiar. I remember feeling it from somewhere, but I'm not sure where from. Kibito didn't interfere in our chat as he wasn't a Kai, but an attendant. Even though his position was higher than the normal Kais, he couldn't interfere in other deities' talks. I nodded towards Shin and answered him. "I'm supposed to balance your work with the gods of destructions. I should make sure he does his job well. Will you create planets at least once every few hundred years?" Shin started to sweat drop and said, "Oh well, you see about that, since Majin Buu absorbed the other case who were more experienced and knew how to create planets. There was no one left to teach me anything. I don't actually know how to create planets, thus I can't do my job as a Kai." I sighed as I already knew of this already. I changed the topic and asked him, "I heard something about a sword that should be around here. Would you mind showing me it?" Shin immediately started to smile, feeling awkward at his lack of knowledge. By my words, he realized that I would have to punish him if he continued doing nothing. He started to walk towards the Z sword's location and said, "Follow me, I can show you the location of the Z sword. While I and Kibito aren't able to get it from the stone it's lodged in, you can give it a try. With your immense power, you should be able to drag it out of there." I nodded at Shin and followed him towards the location of the sword. It was up a giant hill a few kilometers away from the initial location where I teleported to. Kibito was following us from behind with a stern look on his face. I flew up the hill directly to the top and easily dragged the sword out of the hill. Both Shin's and Kibito's jaws dropped to the floor. Seeing how easily I took the sword out, for them, it seemed like it wasn't sealed there at all. Of course, I was already in my Supreme Bodhisattva mode. The dragon's crystal eyes were sparkling as I flicked a finger on the blade of the sword. It immediately broke in two. They couldn't even their jaws back from the floor when they saw how I destroyed their precious sea sword, with only a flick of the finger. Out of the sword's remains an old Kai with a similar skin color and clothing to Shin appeared. He was wrinkled and wore patars on his ears like Shin. He also had a small mustache, and had an unkempt clump of hair on his head. He started to cough and looked around spotting me and the Shin. He immediately got down the hill and said, "You goddamn failure. I was sealed in this sword for tens of thousands of years, and none of the other case could help me get out. All generations got worse from mine, and now they were absorbed by Majin Buu too, letting only a newbie like you. So I guess I have to teach you the basics and everything else." The old Kai looked towards me, bowed and said, "I was good friends with the previous holder of your deity position. I can see that you still have some potential that has to be unleashed. I can help you with that as a reward from breaking me out of that goddamn sword." Shin looked at the old Kai with an awkward expression, not knowing what to say. He could identify the Kai as one of his own kin. His Kai had the same quality, even though it was lower than his. He bowed towards the old Kai, and said in a serious tone of voice, "I will follow the teacher's instructions." Kibito looked from nearby and bowed as well. He was just an attendant, so he would follow whatever instruction the old Kai had for him as well. Old Kai nodded his head and smiled. His smile showed that he lacked tooths in certain spots of his mouth. I knew he looked like this because he fused with a witch, so I declined to comment on his appearance. The other two unknowingly blurted out, "It seems you are really old, Teacher Supreme Kai." The old Kai immediately started to flare up and shouted at both of them, "I look like this because I was tricked into fusing with an old witch. I didn't look like this originally." Kibito and Shin looked at each other and asked simultaneously, "How did you fuse unwillingly?" Old Kai shook his head and said with an exasperated voice, "Those guys didn't even teach you the basics, eh?" He pointed towards the Patara earrings of Shin and said, "You can fuse with the earrings. The power level increase is extremely high, but there's a disadvantage: you won't be able to defuse back again." Shin nodded his head, absorbing the information. I coughed and stopped the old Kai's teaching session. He looked towards me and said, "Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Come over here and wait. I can unlock your potential right now." I came down from the hill and approached the elder Kai. He immediately started to do a weird dance as he circled me. I waited and waited and waited some more. After a few weeks of dancing, I could see the old Kai panting, his tongue stuck out of his mouth as he said in an exhausted tone of voice and fell down, "I can't bring out all of your potential. This is the most I could get out." Shin and Kibito helped the old Kai up, while I clenched my fist as I observed my internal situation with my Kai sense. My base power level was already a little higher than Vegeta's, which was already stronger than Goku in his Super Saiyan 3. I started to power up as the whole sacred world of the Kais started to shake. Old Kai immediately shouted back, "Stop or you will destroy the whole world." I swiftly stopped, deciding to keep my Kai in check and not externalize it. After the activation of my Supreme Bodhisattva mode, the purity of my Kai directly increased to 70%. My eyes glowed as I could feel that my power was getting to unexplainable heights. I still couldn't defeat Beerus, but I was about 35% there. As for Whis and the others, not being a battle maniac like Goku, I only needed to be stronger than Beerus to keep him in check, and properly do my job as the new Buddha of the Universe 7. I breathed out as I reverted my transformation. Old Kai got up from the ground and said, "Well, I did everything I could for you regarding the unleash of your potential. To thoroughly master that guy's technique, you have to get to his sacred land. I'm not entirely sure of his coordinates though. There you could train and master his technique fully." I waved at the Kais as I left their planet. After I left, the old Kai looked at Shin and said, "Okay, now it's time for you to learn everything I know so I can enjoy my retirement. Shin Sweatdrop Case can retire." I was back on Earth as if on cue. My children immediately sprang up in my embrace. Both Jaika and Lazuli were waiting for me too. They got up from the table they were waiting at and said to me, "Krillin, it's been some time since we had some family activities. We decided today it's time for some." We let the children pick where they wanted to go. Both of my children looked at me with happy smiles on their faces. They weren't that small anymore, as Marin was 11 and Ryu was 9.5 now. I smiled back to them and said to everyone, "Of course, where would you like to go?" Both children smiled at each other and said at the same time, "Let's visit some other planets." I decided to entertain them since the children were in my arms. I motioned for Lazuli and Jaika to grab my shoulders. I could use instant transmission without putting my fingers on my forehead by now. Combined with my mastery of the spatial elements I learned from fighting Janemba, it was easy peasy to teleport wherever I wanted to. I decided to teleport to a random civilization and I appeared into a futuristic city. Tons of people with red skin looked at me with white eyes as they started to whisper to each other. Out of a nearby big building came out. Wait, I knew this guy, it was Mutard. I teleported to the planet which I saved from that slug guy. Mutard immediately approached me and said in a loud voice, "Our savior came back to visit." Everyone immediately bowed to me. I used my kai to bring everyone up. Mutard was actually almost kneeling to me. Leslie, Marin, and Ryu looked at me with a questioning gaze. Dakagas then said, "So this is the planet you saved from back then?" I chuckled and asked her, "You still remember about that?" She nodded her head and smiled at me. Mutard immediately invited us inside the building with fervor. He clapped his hands and tens of servants put up a feast extremely quickly. Mutard bowed again and said, "For our savior and his family only the best." Leslie and Jaika giggled while the children immediately got to the food and started to eat. The servants helped Jaika and Leslie with their chairs. They did the same thing for me and Tard as well. The children didn't care as they ate the colored food, and said simultaneously that the food was extremely good. I ate some of the food myself, and I could say they improved the food by quite a lot since last time. Of course, last time feast was from the remains of the food they scavenged. By now their crops and livestock should have all been replenished. I looked around, but I didn't spot Mew Sarka at all. Mutard started the conversation after the meal. "You remember my daughter Sarka? She married a nearby kingdom's prince, and now she is even expecting a child." I nodded my head. It was normal for things to happen like this. It was just sex. I wasn't emotionally invested in her at all, so I didn't really care what happened to her. In Tart's eyes could be seen disappointment. After the feast, we toured the planet and it wasn't very different from Earth. Besides the different cultures, food and the skin color, they were pretty much like humans. We bid our farewell towards Tart and teleported back to Earth. We all enjoyed the mini holiday on the planet which I now knew was called Ryoto Port. I let the children go to play while I had some extra special fun with Jaika and Leslie. Unknowingly time flew by. There was just one more year before Beerus woke up, and I still didn't purify my kai to 100%. I just couldn't find the sacred place where I could finish my training. Maybe it wasn't in Universe 7. I didn't fully explore Universe 6. I needed to go back. Chapter 40. The Sacred Buddha Kingdom. First things first, I had to go and meet with Whis so he can take me to Universe 6. It would be easy, since I almost had a god position now, and he still ate food regularly from Earth. There was no reason for him to refuse me. It took a while, but Whis came back to Earth after a few months of waiting. He was like always pumped up to eat some new type of food. I decided to wait for him to finish his meal before I approached him again. He eyed me and said, "Your progress is quite good, Krillin-san. You are almost ready to take on your god position. Unfortunately, you still haven't reached 100% of your kai purity." I smiled at Whis. He could see through me fairly easily. It was obvious how above me he was in power. Maybe if I got Alter Instinct I might be able to tangle with him, but I'm not sure if I could win. I looked at him and said, "Could you do me another favor, Whis-san? I'm not strong enough to do my work well enough currently. I need to go to Universe 6 to search for the place where the previous Buddha trained." Whis put a hand to his mouth, laughed, then took his staff in his hands. He motioned for me to put a hand on his shoulders so we could leave already. It seemed Whis would like to see someone put Beerus in his place. I guess he didn't like when Beerus was stepping out of line and doing things that he wasn't supposed to do. Just like before, in 2 hours or so we got to Universe 6. We met again with Vados, but unlike before, a fat version of Beerus was groggily cleaning his eyes near Vados. Vados chuckled while the fat Beerus said, "Angel of Universe 7, what are you doing with this guy here?" "Wait a little, this guy, he has the old man's inheritance." He shook his head after his sleepiness wore off and he continued, "Whatever, I don't want to let him in the universe. What are you gonna do about it? You can't act towards me, ha 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 ha." I frowned at the fatty's words. I needed to get to the sacred land to complete my training. If he didn't let me in I needed to force my way off. Champa was the brother of Beerus. There weren't any official comments on who was stronger, but I think Champa was a tad weaker than Beerus. Vados looked at Champa and chuckled. Champa immediately whipped his head back to her and shouted, "What are you laughing at, Vados?" Vados smiled at Champa and said, "Champa-sama, it seemed you got fatter again." Champa growled as his pudgy cheeks inflated up. "I'm not fatter." I coughed and interrupted their argument, which looked like it would go on for a while. I stopped in front of Champa and said, "What do you want to let me travel in Universe 6? Champa put a finger under his fat chin and started to think hard. He also started to sweat intensely. It seemed thinking was an exercise for this fatty god of destruction. After a few minutes of no response, Whis threw me the same type of orb he gave me last time and left, not wanting to wait after Champa's slow thinking process. After tens of minutes, Champa finally thought up on what he wanted and said, "I want some good food from your universe." I sweat dropped while Vados said with an annoyed tone of voice, "It took you 20 minutes to think up of this, Champa-sama. Did your fat start to get to your brain?" I held in my laughter at Vadis's comment, but Champa wasn't going to have any of her snarky comments. I stopped the argument again, and I decided to just give him some ramen. There was no Earth in Universe 6, so he never tasted such a type of food before. After I satisfied the god of destruction culinary needs, I decided it was time to search for the blessed land left behind by the previous Buddha. I decided to first meet up with Lee Sin and ask if he knew its whereabouts, but the planet where I met him was deserted. No other living being was there anymore. What was left was just the training poles Lee used. I flew up and I could see that the training poles were arranged in such a way they left a hidden message for me that said, "Look for the remains of Earth. In its vicinity use your sacred Kai, and you will find the blessed Buddha kingdom. We will meet there again." I flew up from the planet and tried to find the remains of Earth. From what I saw in Dragon Ball Super, planet Earth was destroyed in Universe 6, so I had to find its remains. I flew around randomly not knowing where to start. I decided to start with a nearby dead planet, but since the message said remains, that meant all that remained of Earth were pieces of ground and rock. I couldn't search the whole Universe 6 for some dead pieces of ground. I immediately used my Supreme Bodhisattva mode at its full power, and flew at extremely high speeds around the universe trying to get the signal from the blessed Buddha kingdom. I didn't care if any other deity found about me. Champa already knew, well, the supreme case won't interfere with my search. I suddenly got a response from some ruins in the south part of Universe 6. There I unleashed my sacred Kai fully as a giant golden door appeared in the void. It was inscribed with Buddhist chants in Sanskrit. I could read it due to the mantra. It said, "Live like a Buddha, keep balance in the twin universes. You found your way, so you are worthy." The door opened and absorbed me in. I got up from the ground and all I could see was an endless forest. Everything was back to its cleanest state. The sky was blue, and the Kai concentration in the air was immense. I could feel the air purifying my body and Kai at the same time. Out of the trees appeared Lee. His blindfold was off and his eyes were recovered. He smiled towards me and said, "Fellow disciple Krillin, we meet again. The master left something for you. I already got what was supposed to be mine, and I'm on my way already. Farewell." He opened the golden door that absorbed me in and left Prophet. No indications, nothing, he just left me alone trying to find my way through this place. Well, what a good fellow disciple he is. I started to navigate the sea of trees trying to find what was supposed to be mine. At the same time I circulated my Kai with the help of the mantra, and I could see that my Kai was getting purified, and it wasn't stuck anymore. Maybe I needed to reach 100% Kai purity before the remaining treasures would reveal themselves to me. I sat cross-legged in the air as I levitated using my Kai golden aura encased my body, as I turned the gravity field around me on. The gravity was so high even the reinforced ground of the Buddha kingdom was cracking, but it was repairing itself at high speed as well. I started to circulate my Kai as its purity started to increase at fast speeds, 72%, 76, 81, 99, finally 100. My benevolent Buddha stand appeared behind me as it fused with my body. My power level increased by 250 times permanently, as the stand fused with my body and Kai. The only transformation I had remaining was the Supreme Bodhisattva mode. I woke up and I could feel that all my aura was internalized. I wasn't sure how much time I meditated, but the gravity which was pushing me when I started to meditate under it was useless again for me. I got down to the ground as I sensed my internal condition. My sacred Kai purity finally reached 100% as it crystallized. My body changed too. It wasn't like it was before. It had a different feeling which I couldn't truly explain. In front of me appeared a tiny wooden boat and a bead. A voice appeared in my mind, which explained the use of the two items. The bead was a surrender left from the previous Buddha, and by using it, I could come back to the Buddha kingdom whenever I wanted to. I was currently on the training grounds of the kingdom, so I didn't see all of its benefits. As for the wood boat, it was a special boat that could travel through the boundary of the universes faster than any angel or god could. Well, besides the Grand Priest and Zeno. I took the miniatured items and put them in my clothes pocket. They were bound to me, and only Zeno could take them away or destroy them. The god of destructions couldn't use their special destruction kite to destroy them or me anymore. I was fully bequeathed the title of Buddha now that I reached 100% Kai purity. I decided to travel to the middle of the Buddha kingdom before I left. It wasn't anything impressive in visuals. It reminded me of the Oran temple, but more grand and imposing. Buddha statues were lined before the temple and sticks of incense were burning at the entrance. Nothing too interesting. I decided to lit a stick of incense myself, but when I lit the stick of incense something interesting happened. I could feel that my Kai was moving faster and better than before. Of course, the change was negligible for me as I was already in the realm of gods. Right now I would give myself a 50% to 65% chance to beat Beerus. But others could use this incense to hasten their training speed. I tried to take the incense with me and it worked. There were no restrictions. The thing was there were not many sticks of incense left, so I had to use them smartly. I teleported out of the kingdom and used the boat which enlarged at fast speeds to get to the border of the universe immediately. I decided to break the orb and call Whis. I wanted to surprise him with the boat. Whis came over after a while and gasped when he saw my boat. "Oh, who it seemed you got the rest of the old man's things. Good job, Krillin. I see you don't need my help anymore. Why did you call me?" "Well, I did it so you wouldn't have to worry over me. Also, I wanted to see how fast is the boat compared to you." Whis chuckled and said, "A race is it?" I smiled towards Whis and said, If you want it to be. Was immediately left in a bunch of rainbow kai. While my boat started to travel at immense speeds, I was neck and neck with him. I used some of my sacred kai to power the boat, and it easily took over the first position. I arrived in Universe 7 first, Wiz smiled at me, then left towards the Gods of Destruction realm. I got back to Earth, and from what I could see, my journey to the Buddha Kingdom took me almost 1 year and a half. This included the training. I met with my children, and my wives, Ryu and Marin, were growing along nicely from little kids into budding teens. Jaka and Lazuli were as beautiful as ever as I embraced them. After I played with the children and had some fun with my wives, I decided to invite everyone to the lookout. The human Z fighters and the Saiyans made their way over to the lookout in basically seconds after hearing my voice telepathically. Everyone was way stronger than before. I smiled at them and lit the stick of incense that I got from the kingdom. As they took in the smell, they could feel their kai enliven and purify. They started to gasp, and Goku said, "Wow, this stuff is quite good for training." Gohan chimed in as well. "Yeah, I feel that it's even better than training in the time chamber." Vegeta looked at the stick of incense and was practically salivating inwardly. Raditz and Nappa weren't as interested as they became lazier with time. The human Z fighters liked that they found a way to grow stronger again. It seemed most of them reached a wall. The same could be said about Goku and Vegeta. They couldn't grow any stronger. Gohan, Raditz and Nappa were the only ones who could grow stronger with conventional means. Raditz and Nappa because they didn't take their training seriously, and Gohan because he didn't hit the peak of his potential yet. I left them to their training, and decided to live as a normal human, while training from time to time till another crisis came. But there was no chance of anything else happening. After I fully mastered my Supreme Bidhasavada mode, I was 100% sure I could beat Beerus. Peacefully sleeping on his planet, Beerus sneezed. Unknown to me, he also had some things under his sleeve. Well guys, that is it for now. More uploads soon later.